The rain outside the cafe came down in thin silver ribbons, each drop tapping a soft, hesitant rhythm on the fogged-up window beside Ayesha as she sat alone at the small corner table, her hands wrapped around a cup of chai that had long since turned cold, though she kept holding it because it gave her something to do besides wring her fingers in anxious circles the way she always did when she felt the weight of being unwanted pressed down on her. She had come early, far too early, fixing her scarf in the restroom mirror twice, applying lip balm 3 times, checking her phone so often that she had memorized the tiny scratches on its screen, all because Farah had insisted this blind date was different, that this man was kind, steady, serious about commitment, someone who would not play with her heart the way others had, someone who would not disappear when life became complicated, someone who might, just might, choose her without hesitation. But 45 minutes had crawled by, then 50, then an hour, while she sat pretending to admire the cafe's decor or the shelf of dusty novels behind her, pretending she didn't feel the sting of every door chime that wasn't followed by a man searching for her, pretending she didn't hear the waiter's quiet pity every time he checked if she wanted something else. She kept telling herself she wasn't fragile, she wasn't broken, she wasn't the girl who cried over strangers who didn't show, but the truth was, she had been left behind enough times that she had learned to smile through humiliation, to pretend she didn't secretly wonder if something about her made her unworthy of being chosen. She finally took a deep breath, swallowing the hurt like an old familiar medicine, and began gathering her purse to leave, telling herself she'd laugh about this later, maybe even tell Farah that blind dates were not for women who had learned how to rebuild themselves, only for those who never shattered in the first place. But just as she stood, the cafe door flew open with a gust of wind and a spray of raindrops, and 2 little boys, no older than 7 or 8, tumbled inside wearing matching red jackets soaked from the storm, their sneakers squeaking loudly on the floor as they scanned the cafe with determined eyes. Before she could process anything, the older boy, tall for his age with a missing front tooth and a seriousness that didn't match his young face, spotted her and tugged the younger boy's sleeve. "Ion, it's her," he exclaimed, pulling his brother toward her table as Ayesha blinked in surprise, not knowing whether to sit or stand. The younger one approached her timidly but with purpose, pushing his wet hair from his forehead and asking, "Are you Ayesha?" In a voice so small yet so sure that she could only nod, confusion tightening around her like a thread. The older boy puffed out his chest with the dramatic flair of a secret messenger fulfilling a sacred mission. "Our dad told us to find you," he said. "He's outside. He didn't want you to think he didn't come." Ayesha froze. Dad. The blind date had kids. Farah had never mentioned children. The man himself, in the brief messages they had exchanged, hadn't mentioned them either. She opened her mouth to ask, but the younger boy tugged gently at the edge of her scarf, his voice soft and sincere in a way that made something inside her tremble. "Dad picked you," he whispered. "Not anyone else." He said that. The words landed on her heart like a warm, dangerous promise, dangerous because she didn't want to believe them, didn't want to let hope bloom only to have it crushed again. Before she could gather her thoughts, the cafe door opened once more and a tall man stood under its frame, breathless, drenched from the rain, a mixture of panic and relief flashing in his deep brown eyes the moment he spotted his son standing beside her. He stepped in slowly as though afraid to scare her off, his shirt clinging to his arms, his hair dripping, his expression holding the weight of someone who had run not just through a storm but through years of mistakes he didn't want to repeat tonight. She recognized him instantly from the tiny photo Farah had shown her, a photo that didn't do justice to the tired gentleness carved into his face now. He approached with hesitant steps, running a hand through his wet hair before speaking. I'm so sorry," he said, voice cracking with sincerity. The boys ran ahead. "I didn't want you to think I didn't show. I had car trouble, we got stuck in the rain, and then," he glanced at his sons who watched proudly, as though they had just saved the world. "They insisted on helping me fix everything." He smiled awkwardly, and something inside Ayesha, something quiet and buried, warmed at the sight of a father who had clearly raised 2 boys who adored him enough to brave a storm just to deliver his message. But then came the questions. Why hadn't he told her about his kids? Why hadn't he simply called? As if reading her thoughts, he spoke again, softer this time. "I didn't want to lie," he said. "I just wanted to explain properly, in person." His voice sank with vulnerability. I've made enough mistakes rushing through life. Tonight, I didn't want to start something new with a half-truth." His honesty, raw, messy, unpolished, hit her harder than any apology. She looked down at the boys, their matching jackets dripping puddles onto the cafe floor, their small hands still clutching each other's sleeves as if the world depended on their unity. "Dad really picked you," the younger one repeated with a shy smile. "He told us you're special." Ayesha felt her throat tighten, not from sadness, but from something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time, the possibility that someone might actually mean the words they said. The cafe felt suddenly too small, too warm, too filled with a tenderness she wasn't prepared for. But when she looked up and met the man's eyes, earnest, tired, hopeful, something inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, life wasn't giving her another reason to hurt, maybe it was giving her a reason to begin again. The boys climbed onto the seats beside her without waiting for permission, chattering about how they had convinced their father not to cancel, how they had practiced introducing themselves if they found her before he did, how Dad had stood in front of the mirror rehearsing what he'd say. A blush crept onto the father's face. "They like to overshare," he sighed, but Ayesha found herself smiling, really smiling, for the first time that evening. And as the rain softened outside, the four of them sat together at that little corner table, an unlikely beginning unfolding quietly between them, one shaped not by perfection or planning, but by two drenched boys in red jackets who believed with innocent certainty that their father deserved someone kind, and that Ayesha might be the person he had been waiting for.